They took everything from me, in just one moment. An accident I didn't cause became my death sentence. My license revoked, my job stolen, and my name dragged through the mud. Everyone turned away, even those I had driven for years. But the truth never disappeared. I knew I was framed. And now I'm back behind the wheel, not to carry passengers, but to erase those who destroyed my life. The rain had always been my companion. Every night, as the city lights blurred against the wet pavement, I drove. My car wasn't just a vehicle, it was my second skin, my fortress, the place where I felt in control. 4 years I had been a respected driver, trusted to deliver people safely, no matter the hour. Businessmen, politicians, students, mothers with their children, I had carried them all. And in return I had built a reputation, reliable, discreet, unshakable. Until the night that shattered everything. It was a Thursday evening, the kind where traffic snarled endlessly and people's tempers boiled over. I remember picking up a passenger, a man in a dark coat, face hidden beneath the brim of a hat. He smelled faintly of cigarettes and gasoline, though I didn't think much of it at the time. He gave me an address that seemed oddly industrial, far from the usual nightlife or cozy neighborhoods. Halfway there the sirens came. Police cars swarmed like vultures. I was ordered to stop, dragged from my seat, slammed onto the cold asphalt. My passenger vanished into the chaos, leaving behind nothing but an unmarked briefcase on the back seat. Inside that case? Drugs. Enough to bury me under charges I had never even dreamed of. From that moment, my life was dismantled piece by piece. My license revoked. My car, impounded. My reputation, obliterated. Headlines painted me as a criminal mastermind hiding in plain sight. Friends stopped answering my calls. My wife, she couldn't bear the shame. She left, taking our daughter with her. They didn't just ruin me. They erased me. But while the world spat on my name, I knew the truth. I had been set up. That passenger wasn't random. The drugs weren't random. And the speed with which the police and the press devoured me, it was all too perfect. Someone wanted me destroyed. For a year I rotted. Jobless, homeless, living in the shadows of the city I once knew so well. I slept under bridges, in abandoned buildings, sometimes in the back of rusted cars whose owners had long since disappeared. Every night I stared at the rain-slick streets and burned with the same question. Who did this to me? The answer came slowly. Rumors whispered in alleyways. Old contacts who pitted me dropping hints. A face here, a name there. Eventually a picture formed. It wasn't just one man. It was a circle. A small network of powerful men who had used me as a disposable pawn. They were laundering money, moving drugs, making deals, and they needed a scapegoat to distract the authorities. I was perfect. Clean record, trusted driver, invisible in the eyes of those I served. They stole my life to protect theirs. And that's when the idea began to take root. Revenge. Not the kind shouted in the heat of anger, but the kind that simmers, that grows sharper with every sleepless night. If they thought they had buried me, they were wrong. I would return to the streets, but not as the driver they once knew. No. I would return as something else entirely. I spent months rebuilding myself. I took small jobs for cash, enough to rent a garage on the outskirts of the city. I scavenged parts, rebuilt an old black sedan piece by piece until it purred like a beast reborn. I studied maps, routes, the schedules of those who had betrayed me. I learned their habits, their favorite bars, the times they left their offices, the women they visited when their wives weren't looking. Piece by piece, I constructed not just a plan but a theater. Every detail mattered. Because when I struck, it wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be simple. It would be unforgettable. The first name on my list was Kravitz. He was a mid-level businessman, nothing flashy on the surface, but I knew the truth. He was the one who had slipped that cursed briefcase into my back seat. Without him, the whole setup wouldn't have worked. I shadowed him for weeks. He lived in an expensive penthouse, the kind with tinted windows and a private elevator. Every night, he returned home at 11 sharp, after drinking just enough whiskey to dull his reflexes. He thought he was untouchable, shielded by money and his friends in the circle. But he had forgotten something. I had been invisible once and I could be invisible again. The night I made my move, the rain was heavy, drowning the streets in shimmering darkness. I parked my car across from his building, engine silent, eyes locked on the glowing lobby doors. At exactly 11:04, Kravitz stumbled out of a taxi, fumbling with his coat. He never saw me coming. By the time he noticed the figure in the hood, it was too late. My fist struck like the rain itself, sudden, relentless. He collapsed, gasping, his briefcase clattering against the wet pavement. In seconds I dragged him into the alley. His mouth opened, a muffled cry tearing out, but the sound was swallowed by the storm. I didn't kill him, not yet. Death would have been too easy. Instead, I tied him to a chair in the same garage where I rebuilt my car. The air smelled of oil and rust, the walls echoing with distant thunder. I waited until he regained consciousness. When his eyes finally focused on me, terror replaced the arrogance I remembered so well. "You," he croaked, his voice trembling. "Yes, me." I leaned close so he could see every scar the streets had carved into my face. "You remember the briefcase, don't you?" His silence was answer enough. "I spent a year rotting while you drank whiskey in your tower," I continued, my voice low, steady. "Tell me who gave you the order and maybe you'll walk out of here alive." He tried to play brave at first, muttering excuses, swearing he had nothing to do with it. But fear is a stubborn thing. It eats at men, strips away their lies. All it took was the slow scrape of my knife across the chair's wooden armrest, the glint of steel in the dim light, and his resolve shattered. "It was Volkov," he whispered finally. "He runs it all. The drugs, the money, everything. I only did what I was told." Volkov. The name burned like fire in my veins. Kravitz begged for mercy after that, swearing he was just a pawn. Maybe he was. But pawns bleed just as well as kings. I left him alive, but broken, his empire of lies already collapsing from the inside. When the police found him wandering the streets the next morning, bruised and babbling, he was no longer a threat. He was a warning. That was only the beginning. Each man in the circle thought he was untouchable. Each one hid behind money, guards, reputations. But I knew their routines better than they knew themselves. One by one I would dismantle them. Second on my list was Demyanenko, a lawyer with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. He was the one who had twisted the media against me, feeding lies to reporters, making sure the world saw me as guilty before I even stood trial. Without him, my name might still have had a chance. I didn't confront him in an alley. I didn't drag him to my garage. No. With him, I wanted the world to watch. So I hacked into his phone, his emails, his private files, every dirty secret he had buried under legal contracts and hidden accounts. And when I was ready, I leaked everything. Offshore accounts, bribes, blackmail, his career was shredded overnight. By the time the news broke, he was already on a plane trying to escape. But I was waiting. When he landed, I was the driver assigned to his car. He didn't recognize me at first, too busy panicking, calling his contacts, begging for help. Only when the car doors locked and the engine roared down the wrong road did his eyes meet mine in the rearview mirror. "You," he whispered, the color draining from his face. "Enjoy the ride," I told him. Each victory tasted like rain on my tongue, sharp, cold, cleansing. But with every step forward, Volkov's shadow loomed larger. He was the core, the king, the one who had orchestrated everything. To reach him, I had to dismantle his circle piece by piece, until there was nowhere left for him to hide. But Volkov was smart. He had eyes everywhere. And soon he knew someone was hunting him. The city itself began to change, guards on every corner, surveillance tightening, whispers growing louder in the underworld. And then came the message, scrawled on the windshield of my car in red paint that dripped like blood. "We know you're alive." For the first time I realized, the hunt went both ways. The message on my windshield changed everything. Up until now I had been the hunter. Silent, patient, choosing my prey. But now, Volkov's men were circling and they wanted me to know it. I cleaned the paint off, but the words stayed burned into my mind. "We know you're alive." It meant no more shadows. No more safety. From that moment, every street corner felt like a trap, every car engine behind me a threat. But it also meant something else. Volkov was afraid. And fear, once it takes root, spreads fast. The net tightens. The next few weeks were chaos. Every move I made was mirrored. I'd spot the same black SUV trailing me on 3 different days. My safe house was raided. Luckily I had already abandoned it. Even my garage, the place where I rebuilt myself, was torched in the middle of the night. But destruction only fueled me. They thought burning steel and concrete would kill me? No. It only sharpened my resolve. I went underground. New identities, new apartments, cheap motels where the smell of mold mixed with cigarette smoke. I stopped being a man and became a ghost, haunting Volkov's empire from the shadows. The trap. The third name on my list was Petrov, Volkov's right hand. He controlled the weapons, the shipments, the enforcers. If Volkov was the brain, Petrov was the fist. Taking him down would send tremors through the whole network. But Petrov was careful. Paranoid. He moved only with bodyguards, armored convoys, hidden routes. He didn't touch phones or computers. So I created bait. One night, Whispers spread of a new shipment arriving in the docks, supposedly a deal worth millions. In reality, it was nothing but smoke, a rumor I crafted, feeding it carefully through channels I knew Petrov couldn't resist. And he came. Convoys of SUVs, armed men, floodlights cutting through the fog. Petrov himself stepped onto the dock, barking orders. He expected crates of weapons. What he found instead was me. The docks exploded into chaos. I struck fast, using the fog, the shadows, the panic of men who thought they were walking into a payday but instead walked into war. One by one the guards fell, not dead, just broken enough to never lift a weapon again. When the smoke cleared, Petrov was on his knees, his gun kicked into the water, my boot pressing against his throat. "You should have stayed home," I whispered. His eyes widened, the reality sinking in. "You don't understand," he rasped. "Volkov isn't just a man. He's bigger than all of us. You can't kill him." "Then I'll burn everything he owns until there's nothing left," I said. And I did. Petrov's empire collapsed overnight. Warehouses burned. Accounts drained. His men scattered like rats. Petrov himself disappeared, though whether he fled or Volkov silenced him, I didn't care. Volkov strikes back. But with every strike I made, Volkov adapted. He was no ordinary enemy, he wasn't just a criminal. He was a strategist, a warlord cloaked in the skin of a businessman. Soon it wasn't me hunting his men. It was him hunting me. The first attempt came in the form of a sniper's bullet, shattering the window of the motel I was hiding in. The second was a car bomb, poorly timed or maybe just rushed but close enough that I felt the flames lick the back of my neck. And then, they came for me directly. One night, as I returned to the crumbling apartment I used as a hideout, I found the door already ajar. Silence inside. My instinct screamed. I entered anyway. For men waited. Masked. Rifles. Precise. Professional. They thought they could drag me alive. They thought wrong. The fight was brutal, messy. Knives, fists, gunshots echoing off the peeling walls. By the end, 3 lay motionless, the 4th crawling, choking on his own blood. I grabbed him by the collar, dragged him to the shattered window and held him over the edge. "Where's Volkov?" I snarled. His lips trembled. "He's waiting, for you." And then he smiled. Blood spilling between his teeth. The C4 strapped to his chest blinked red. I threw him out the window a second before the explosion tore the building apart. The final stage. I knew then, Volkov wanted the endgame. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was pulling me toward him, step by step, like a spider luring prey into its web. And I was ready. I spent weeks preparing, gathering weapons, studying blueprints, mapping out Volkov's fortress, a mansion on the edge of the city, guarded like a military base. He thought his walls would protect him. He thought his men would stop me. He was wrong. The night I struck, the city slept under a heavy fog. I cut through guards like shadows cut through light, silent, relentless. Security cameras blinked and died. Dogs barked and fell silent. At last I stood in front of the doors. Beyond them, Volkov. I pushed them open. Face to face. He was waiting in his study as if expecting me. A glass of brandy in his hand, his expensive suit perfectly pressed. No fear in his eyes, only a calm, mocking smile. "I knew you'd come," he said softly. "Revenge is such a predictable poison." "Funny," I replied, stepping closer. "Poison is exactly what you fed me." We circled each other, predator and prey, though in that moment it was hard to tell which was which. He spoke of power, of how men like me were disposable, tools to be used and discarded. He spoke of how killing him would change nothing, another would rise in his place. But I wasn't here for philosophy. I was here for blood. The fight was brutal. He was stronger than I expected, a soldier once before money made him a king. We traded blows that cracked bones, slammed into walls, shattered furniture. Blood painted the room. But in the end, it was me who stood over him, my knife at his throat. His final words were a whisper. "You think this ends with me?" "Yes," I said, and drove the blade home. The end, or the beginning. When it was over, I stepped into the night, the mansion burning behind me. I had destroyed them all, the circle, the pawns, the king. But his words lingered in my mind. "You think this ends with me?" Maybe Volkov was right. Maybe another would rise. But if they did, I'd be waiting. Because I was no longer the man they betrayed. I was the fire they created. And I was never going to stop.